right, pop up. We're gonna give this a shot. We're gonna see if we can't tie a Royal Coachman, and which uses 3 kinds of feathers. I kind of want to show you how I use a bunch of different kinds of feathers in fly tying. I'm going to use a size 16 hook. I'm going to put it in the vise first and smash the barb down. I started doing that about a year ago. Makes me a little bit happier knowing that the fish get off easier once you hook them. You lose a lot more that way too, but you know, whatever. It does keep the fish happier and healthier. They pop right off the hook once you slide it backwards. Okay, so there's the size. I think this is about a size 16. I put a little bit of a bead head on it. The Royal Coachman can be tied a bunch of different ways. I've been tying it as a wet fly. I actually took a couple test patterns over the pond today, and they worked pretty well. So I'm pretty stoked. Wet fly just means it's in the water, not on the surface, and it's in the water column as opposed to bouncing along the bottom. If it's kind of bouncing along the bottom, it's more of a nymph. And if it's sitting on top, it's more of a dry fly or an emerger or a spinner. Wet fly is kind of fun for ponds because you can kind of chuck it out, let it sink a little bit, then twitch it back like it's swimming. This one drew a bunch of strikes. I landed one little fishy and lost a whole bunch more because I'm out of practice apparently. I'm using some relatively thin thread because it's a small fly, and tying small flies with big thread is a total pain in the ass. First feather we're going to use is from an orange pheasant. I think this is kind of a chest feather patch, I think. I don't know. Max bought these years ago when he was little, and I never thought I'd use them, and I absolutely adore them. They're great for tails, for things like this. If you take a single feather off, it looks kind of like that. And then it's got these awesome little bars across the feather. And then what you do is you just tie that in, you bunch it up, and then you tie it in. The orange can face up, give it a couple wraps here to cinch it down, and then you kind of work it to the back. And then you can cut off this stuff in the front. And then you've got this really, really cool like fan tail. And then you can, once you kind of see it all in there, you can kind of bring the thread back. You can kind of steer with the thread too, which is kind of rad. I'm just going to do a couple passes to make sure it's cinched down pretty well. Okay, so that's the first feather we're going to use of 3. The next one is we're going to use Peacock Herl. So this is a bunch of it that they sell it kind of grouped up like this. But this is the fancy like iridescent feather that you see. Here's the what's called the eye of the tail. Like the males have these big ass feathers on the back when they're mating. They throw those out there for the female, and then the barbs, these Herls are the ones that kind of come out down the stem. I've cut most of this one off. I've saved the eyes. I saved those for special flies. But they sell, it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $4 for this whole patch of Peacock Herl. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off a couple of those. They're nice iridescent color. It's a really, really pretty green. And it reflects light really nicely in the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie that in near the bead, just like I did with the other one. It's a pain in the ass to work with. It breaks really easily. It unravels for me really easily. I don't tie with it very often, but I kind of discovered this pattern, the Royal Coachman. It calls for Peacock Herl. So what I'm going to do is this is called palmering, and I guess the guy's name was Palmer that came up with the strategy. So I'm spinning it around the hook. And then my job is to keep them together. And then I'm going to pinch off right there. I'm going to pass the thread behind it. This is where I usually screw up. There we go. I think I got it this time. And what I just did, I'm going to pass another one behind there just to make sure. And what I just did was I made a little tiny collar of Peacock Herl. And then I'm gonna bring the red thread back to make it a little bit shorter. Because what we're going to do is we're going to put a red third right, oh, Willow, hi. We're going to put a red third right in the middle. We're going to put this Peacock Herl's in the back, and then we're going to have another one in the front. And I'm going to use a little bit fatter thread to kind of build up that middle a little bit, just to make it quicker. There we go. That looks pretty good, actually. I'm going to cut that loose end off. Yeah, and then we're going to whip finish with my fancy little figure 4 tool. Give it a quick little knot. Whoops. Just screwed that up. Give me a sec. That's funny. Figures the one time I screw up a whip finish is when you're watching the video I'm making. Yeah, it's a pretty idiot-proof tool, even for me. Okay, that's not as clean as I'd hoped, but it doesn't matter because we're going to put Peacock Herl on top of that again. So I'm going to pass this through. Okay, so now I got a nice red midsection. I'm going to get a couple more Peacock Herls, and we're going to tie the front third in the same way. I'm going to tie this in right here. And then I'm going to spin it around. Oh, that's a nice red. See that red thing right in the middle there? That's going to look sharp. Yeah. Let me tie this around. Look at that. That looks pretty cool. All right, so now we got one more feather to tie in. This is a, I think this is called a saddle. It's like a chest piece from a chicken. I think this is ginger is the color. I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of pretty. It's kind of hard to see, I think, from where you are, but it's got a nice little kind of a dark black stripe in the middle of it, but otherwise it's kind of orange and brown. And the thing about these saddles is, you've got these really tiny feathers at the bottom, and then as you go up, they get bigger and bigger. So the idea is you kind of match the feather to the hook you're tying on. There's the single hackle feather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back the barbs. They're pretty webby, so they come out quite a bit like that. And then the feather has like let me see if I can hold this for you. It's got like the out facing part, the part that faces out on the saddle, which is this one, and then the in facing part, which is the kind of the duller color. And I'm going to tie it in at the tip, right about there where I stopped preening backwards. I'm going to tie it in at that tip. Pull it back a little bit more. Lay it in there, give it a couple rounds, a couple traps to really get it on there. And then if I can do this well, I'm going to snip off that tag end of the feather without cutting the thread. I'm known for doing that sometimes too, when you're cutting the tag end of the feather off, and you end up cutting the tag end of the thread off too. So that's what it looks like now. You're kind of tied in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to palmer hackle just like I did with the Peacock Herl, except we're going to be spinning the feather around the back of that bead. And what happens is you can start to see it. I'm only going to do it like 2 or 3 times. You don't want to do it too much because it gets bunched up. But it creates this really cool halo. I'll spin it around once I tie it off. And what just often happens with me where I do it too many times, and then I end up getting it, it slides down the face of the bead and undoes all the cool spiraling I just did. So I'm going to give it 2 quick little turns there. I'm going to snip off the tag end of the feather. Boop. And now you got this kind of crazy punk rock looking mohawk of feathers there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumbs and just push them backwards. Use my left hand. And then I'm going to wrap the thread around the front a few times to kind of encourage those feathers to lean backwards. Giving it a nice red collar. It also helps because it has gives it a nice red sheen at the front of that too, which I'm not sure if that's important, but it looks nice. And now I'm going to use my whip finish tool. Give it 1, probably do 3 kind of overhand knots, 2 and 3. All right, and then we're gonna snip that thread off, and that should catch some fish. That's a wet fly. The hackles here, the longer ones, kind of undulate in the water, and everything else just gets the fishy's attention. So that's my kind of variant of a Royal Coachman. A traditional Royal Coachman also has a white feather that comes off the top. Oh, sorry, that white feather that comes off the top too. There's the same fly with a little white kind of feather off the top. I didn't try this one today. I caught the fish that I caught on the one without the white feather, so I'm guessing it worked. So anyway, next one we'll show you a dry fly.